All right, hi, thank you. My name is Chris Remy, and I'm here as your voice of the customer. I have 3 children in Leander ISD, 2 in elementary and 1 that just started middle school. And as the customer, I urge you to fix the math TEKS and put them back on the solid footing of proven math instruction. I will tell you what I'd like to see change, but first I would like to comment on some things that I heard yesterday during the working session. First, I heard a very disturbing comment from Professor Geller addressing the widespread frustration with the new TEKS among parents and children. She said that that frustration was, quote, not a bad thing. What a horrible thing to say. When 8-year-olds are crying at the kitchen table over convoluted ways to do simple arithmetic, that's not a bad thing. This is not hyperbole. We experienced this in my house, and I know many other families that experience the same thing. Or when kids like my son, who never had a problem with math before, now say, I stink at math because only one of the 5 different division methods makes sense to him. That's not a bad thing. Second, I heard several very dismissive statements about how change is hard and people don't like change. Well, sometimes change is hard and people don't like it because the change is bad. Losing your job is change. Being diagnosed with cancer is change. So please, let's not be dismissive of legitimate, well-informed objections by saying, well, people are afraid of change. I'm asking you to remove the excessive emphasis on process, both in the process standards, but more importantly, in the content standards, which do dictate methodology and multiple methods. John showed an example earlier. I have some in my handout as well. And it's confusing children who haven't learned one way yet, and they're being asked to do 5 because it's going to be on the test. This is not using different methods to find the one that works for every child. It's teaching 5 methods because all 5 methods are expected someday to be on the star. Reform math advocates, sorry, I'm skipping ahead here. So I would argue that it's not even about whether they learn the standard algorithm. We talk about that a lot. It's really about that most precious commodity, time. Reform math advocates can give lip service to balance and say, to be sure, practice and procedural fluency are important, but if there is no time for it, it's not happening. And that's what we're seeing now in the real world. No time for practice, no time for memorization, no time for multiplication tables. Without time for these things, no amount of talking about math or drawing pictures about math is going to matter. So much time is being taken up by these convoluted methods that the TEKS do require that there's no time left. To make matters worse, what little time is left outside the school day is now taken up by tutoring. There has been an explosion in math tutoring. Business is booming for Sylvan, Kumon, Mathnasium, and many more. And good luck finding a teacher who has openings for after-school tutoring. In my neighborhood, high school kids who do volunteer tutoring say that what was once about a 50-50 split between math and other subjects has now flipped to 100% math. Please keep in mind that when anyone tries to show you test scores that purport to prove the new TEKS are working, ask them for results that control for outside tutoring. Yes, ma'am. So my final request is that because there is this lack of evidence that this has been tested and that it's a more effective way, I understand it's a more popular way, that I'd like the process standards, whether they're in the front or the beginning, that's fine, but the actual content standards, of which I have an example here, contain very explicit instructions to teachers. They don't need to be trained. They're doing exactly what these documents tell them to do multiple strategies, use process standards to do simple 2-digit multiplication or addition, and that sort of thing.
Mr. Maynard, and then Ms. Miller, I'll put you next.
You could give us an example of what you were just getting ready to.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
I will.
please.
Oh, sure. So this is from, so in your handout, this is from the 4th grade, TEKS number 4.
Okay, what's going on here? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Oh, the
Mrs. Miller
example.
asked me for the specific example. Right. So I don't think anybody is arguing about the process standards and that you need to think through math problems, and whether they're at the beginning or the end is fine, but they are in the content standards. So this one, 4D, says use strategies and algorithms. Strategies may include mental math, partial products, commutative, associative, distributive. You know, if anybody here has a red pen, I could fix this one for you right now. We'll just strike out the beginning, first clause, and then the end with the strategies, and what we're left with is a standard that says multiply up to a 4-digit number by a 1-digit number, and multiply a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. That's what to learn. We're not telling students how they have to learn it. We're not telling teachers how they have to teach it. We're saying this is what we expect students to be able to do. All the rest is what's causing the confusion, and more importantly, is taking up so much time that things like the multiplication tables are going out the window.
Mr. Maynard.
It's okay. It's been rough. It's all good. Thanks for being back. I'm just kind of curious. You've had an opportunity. I've got 2 questions. I'm just going to ask them both at once. Okay.
Sir.
And so, first of all, is that you came here with some prepared testimony. I know that you have listened to some of the earlier testimonies from today, and I'm kind of curious to hear your reaction to that first. And secondly, is that I'm always interested to kind of hear when you are visiting with rank and file teachers on campuses, kind of what feedback that you're receiving from them, because sometimes we don't always hear from them.
So I have two thoughts on earlier testimony. So obviously the issue of how well researched this new math is and what evidence there is a hotly contested subject. I know, Mr. Rowley, you asked that question yesterday, and I think you got a very vague answer, that some of these things are studied. I know that if you were to ask a medical researcher, they'd be able to rattle off the Framingham Heart Study and the Harvard Nurses Study, but there was not one study that was named when that question was asked. I know one. It's called the Arc Center Tri-State Study, and it was actually a well-constructed, controlled study of traditional math versus reform math, and it showed no benefit to reform math. They tried to pretty up the results, confusing the word statistically significant with the way we view the word significant, but it boiled down to one question on one test that students got a D+ on instead of a D.
So when you say reform math, are you talking about Common Core math? What are you talking about?
I would say Common Core math is a flavor of reform math, but generally the idea...
It's a flavor, but it's not, so the reform math study you're talking about is the one that was early on tried, is that the California one model that
It
they
keeps
tried
coming
to
back.
adopt?
So the way I would describe it is that reform math is this idea that there was this dystopian past where kids were just locked in a room to memorize facts and never understood anything, which that time never existed. So as a reaction to this supposed time, now we have to have all this conceptual stuff and drawing pictures. And that's what I would call reform math, is understanding without knowledge.
When was that study, I guess is my question?
That study was in 2003.
Okay, so it's before this latest iteration of
That's
what
right.
we're doing right.
That's right. And just as an added fun little thing here in my handout, so yesterday's discussion about cupcakes reminded me of something that I'd seen, which was an earlier example of using cupcakes for fractions for conceptual understanding, and this is from a textbook from 1940. So there was never a time when all we did was ask kids to memorize things without understanding it. It's always been that case. That's what good instruction is. The other thing that I would say about earlier testimony is that a light bulb went off for me in that there's a disconnect between TEKS and STAR. Because when a teacher looks at these TEKS, they're looking at it the way a lawyer looks at a contract. I have to be responsible for every jot and tittle on this page because I know that my scores are going to be scrutinized and my principals and the districts and the superintendents. So they, of course, are looking at every single thing here and saying, well, let me write a lesson plan that includes mental math and partial products and commutative and associative. And they can't use their judgment to create lesson plans because they're reading this, as I said, like a lawyer would a contract, because they know it's going to be on the STAR. All of the professional educators that look just at this say, well, we like this is a great guide to how to teach math. And that may well be true, but it's not a great guide to how to teach math when all 500 things on here are going to be on a test that could mean somebody's job. I think those two things need to be separated. And if that's directing assessments to only test the part where we're multiplying 2-digit numbers and getting the answer and leave the rest of it out, but somehow that connection needs to be severed so that teachers can get to using this as a guide to good instruction and not a contract that's going to mean their job and their principal's job. Sorry? Oh, the rank and file teachers. Yes, thank you. So I think that experienced teachers are looking at the TEKS as a guiding document and saying there is a lot in here that they like. Because as I said, there never was a time when all we did was memorize facts. There was always conceptual understanding. And they like the idea of, oh, an array model, there's an interesting way of attacking that problem and teaching it. I think less experienced teachers are the ones that are more likely to be sort of nervously reading this document and studying it and being sure that they, check off every single box. And I think the teachers that understand that are the ones that you see that have come from Wimberley and have said, this is taking over the whole year, which, by the way, the school year does not go from September to June. It goes from September to STAR. And they're looking at how much time they have to cover all that material, and it's putting pressure on the things that we know to be good instruction, practice, memorization, times tables, that sort of thing.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you for your explanation. But we have a curriculum that's been voted on, it's out there, books are out there. It is very hard to stop, go back, unless you're in the process of developing it. So I'm not sure this is fixable in this cycle. And I'm just being very blunt about it.
Well, you're not using the change is hard argument on me now, are you?
Anyway.
Change is expensive, yeah.
Expensive.
You make a lot of sense. I wish we could do this.
Well, I'm no expert on the subject, but I just think that there's an easy way to either give teachers different guidance, as well as to do something with the assessment instrument that is driving a lot of this behavior. We just need to sever that connection, turn this back into guidance of good instruction and not how you're going to keep your job. All right, thank you very much.